Welcome, dear listener. You've found your way to History for Sleep, a quiet corner where the past unfolds slowly, softly, and with just enough detail to help you drift into rest. Tonight, we'll step back into the world of ancient Rome, not in the noise and bustle of midday, but in the gentle hours when the sun has set and the stars keep watch above the city. Before we begin, I'd love to invite you to be part of this growing community. If you enjoy these stories, please take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. It truly helps this channel reach more people who, like you, are searching for calm and comfort at night. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell me what parts of history you're most interested in. And let me know when and where you listen, whether it's in bed at night, during a quiet afternoon nap, or even while traveling. Your thoughts help shape what we explore together. So now, let's slow down. Breathe deeply. Imagine the warmth of the Roman sun fading from the marble stones of the streets. The day's clamor quiets. Lamps flicker to life. A different rhythm awakens, softer, gentler, as the great city exhales into evening. This journey isn't about rushing, but about drifting. We'll walk Rome's streets at dusk, step into homes and gardens, listen to the hum of night markets and the hush of families preparing for sleep. Together, we'll notice the little details, the fragrance of olive oil lamps, the faint sound of fountains, the distant call of a night watchman. Let this story carry you, slowly and steadily, away from the worries of your day and into the stillness of Rome under the stars. So settle in, rest comfortably. Let's begin our walk into the evening world of ancient Rome. The day in Rome has been long, full of noise and movement, and the city itself seems to exhale as the sun lowers behind the western hills. Twilight arrives gently, not with sudden darkness, but with a gradual softening of the light. The sharp angles of temples and monuments blur into warm silhouettes. The marble gleams faintly, no longer blazing under the midday sun, but glowing softly as if remembering the light it held only hours before. This is the moment when the rhythm of the city begins to shift. From the Forum to the crowded insulae, where ordinary families live, people are finishing their day's tasks. Shopkeepers sweep the last of the dust from their doorways before pulling heavy shutters across their stalls. The sound of wooden beams falling into place echoes along the narrow lanes. Artisans put down their tools with a satisfied sigh, wiping sweat and dust from their arms. Farmers who came into the city with baskets of produce pack away what remains, tying bundles of herbs or securing a jug of olive oil for the journey back. Above the rooftops, the sky deepens into bands of amber, rose, and purple. Faint streaks of cloud catch the fading light, while the first evening star becomes visible, bright against the changing sky. For the Romans, this star was more than decoration. It was a sign from the heavens, a guide for both travelers and dreamers. Many would glance upward at the same time, reminded of the constancy of the gods. In the streets, the heat of the day still lingers, held by the paving stones and the walls of the buildings. Yet a coolness begins to drift in, carried by the river. The Tiber, winding through the heart of the city, reflects the colors of the sunset. Its surface ripples gently, breaking the light into countless pieces that float downstream. The smell of water, fresh and earthy, rises from it and mingles with the sense of the evening meal. You might pause here and simply listen. The sounds of Rome at twilight are layered like music. There is still the chatter of people returning home, voices echoing from one side of the street to the other. There is the clip of sandals on stone, the creak of wooden carts pushed back into storage, the distant clang of metal as blacksmiths put away their tools. But already, softer sounds are rising. The laughter of children as they run toward their homes, the murmur of neighbors greeting one another at the close of day, and the faint trickle of water from fountains where women draw jars for the night. The smell of food grows stronger as twilight deepens. From one doorway comes the fragrance of lentils simmering with onions and herbs. From another, the richer aroma of fish stewing in wine. Bread still warm from the ovens releases its comforting scent into the air. Olive oil hisses as it touches hot pans, carrying with it the earthy perfume of the groves that surround the city. These smells are not just nourishment. They are reminders of family, of routine, of the comfort of ordinary life. In the wealthier districts, the great houses of the patricians prepare for a different kind of evening. Servants move quietly through courtyards, lighting lamps and arranging cushions. Bronze lamps are filled with oil and fitted with wicks that burn slowly, casting steady circles of golden light. Statues of gods stand watch in alcoves, their marble faces flickering in the glow. Fountains murmur gently, their waters glinting under the rising moon. Masters recline on couches, waiting for their meal, while slaves bring trays of fruit, cheese, and bread. The world inside these houses is calm, enclosed, and private, separated from the noise of the streets outside. But in the insulae, the tall apartment blocks where most Romans lived, life feels different. These buildings are crowded, their rooms small, their stairways narrow. As evening falls, the windows glow faintly with lamplight. Families gather together, often sharing food with neighbors, their laughter and conversation spilling into the street below. The sound of a mother singing to her child mixes with the chatter of men discussing their day's work, while children play with small clay toys until they are called inside. Here, twilight is communal, full of voices and motion. Even as the city moves toward rest, the streets themselves change character. In the brightness of day, they were filled with carts and traders, arguments and deals, but now they grow quieter. Torches are placed at key intersections, their flames sputtering against the night breeze. The smell of smoke joins the scent of food, creating an atmosphere that is both lively and calming. Shadows stretch across the paving stones, and every flicker of light creates a play of shapes against the walls. For a moment, you might imagine the city as a stage, where countless small dramas unfold in the half-light. Some people use this hour for worship. Shrines at street corners glow with offerings of incense. Tiny flames burn before statues of lares, the household gods, protecting families as they settle in for the night. The air is touched with the sharp scent of frankincense, or the softer smoke of herbs. Those who walk past pause briefly, offering a prayer or gesture, seeking safety in the hours ahead. In a city as vast and unpredictable as Rome, the night always carried a hint of uncertainty. These small rituals offered comfort and hope. Not everyone retreats indoors. Taverns begin to fill with patrons seeking company. Their doors are open, revealing the glow of lamps within. The sound of dice rattling on wooden tables mingles with bursts of laughter and the occasional shout of triumph or loss. Jugs of wine are poured, bread is broken, and bowls of olives and cheese are shared among friends. Music drifts out as a musician plucks a lyre or plays a flute, the notes carrying easily into the street. To wander past is to feel the pull of warmth and merriment, a reminder that even in a city of millions, people crave simple joys. Meanwhile, those whose work begins at night stir from their rest. Bakers prepare their ovens, kneading dough that will be ready by dawn. The smell of flour and yeast floats from their workshops, a promise of tomorrow's bread. The night watchmen gather at their posts, torches in hand, speaking quietly before dispersing through the streets. Their task is to keep order, though their presence is as much symbolic as practical. Still, their silhouettes moving through the firelight give reassurance to those making their way home. And as the last glow of sunset fades, the stars emerge in full. Above Rome, the sky becomes a vast, dark canvas, scattered with constellations. To the Romans, each star carried meaning, tied to myths and stories. Sailors trusted them for navigation, farmers for signs of the seasons, and poets for inspiration. Standing in the streets of Rome, you would feel the weight of history in the heavens as much as on the ground. The night sky was both comfort and mystery, its silence vast above the hum of human life. The city at twilight is not one voice, but many. It is the hush of the forum, the glow of lamps in marble courtyards, the bustle of insulae stairways, the laughter from taverns, the quiet work of bakers, and the eternal murmur of the river. It is a place between worlds, not the labor of day, not the silence of night, but a gentle transition that cradles both. For the weary, it is a promise of rest. For the restless, it is an invitation to linger. So let yourself walk here, slowly through these imagined streets. Listen to the footsteps fading, the voices softening, the sounds of the city growing gentler with each moment. Feel the warmth of stone beneath your hands, the cool breeze lifting from the river, the glow of lamps guiding your way. The day has ended, the night has begun, and Rome itself seems to breathe more slowly, inviting you to do the same. The city at twilight, Rome settling into evening, becomes more than history. It becomes a lullaby, whispered across centuries. A reminder that even the greatest of cities must yield to the quiet of night. As twilight deepens, Rome begins to sparkle with little points of light. The sun has gone, the streets lie in shadow, and yet the city does not surrender to darkness. Instead, it glimmers with the glow of countless oil lamps, tiny flames sheltered in clay, bronze, and stone. These lamps were the heartbeat of Roman nights. Without them, the city would have been swallowed by blackness, its streets treacherous and its homes closed in gloom. With them, life continued. Families gathered, travelers found their way, and Rome itself, so vast and full of life, seemed to breathe beneath the stars. Imagine walking through a narrow street as night falls. At first, the darkness feels thick, pressing close between the tall buildings. Then, one by one, doors open and lamps appear in windows. Their golden circles spill across the paving stones, soft and uneven, flickering with every draft of air. Some lamps burn steadily, their wicks trimmed carefully, their reservoirs filled with clear oil. Others sputter and smoke, their flames struggling, sending up thin wisps of soot that stain the plaster walls above them. The Romans were practical about their light, but they were also imaginative. Lamps came in countless shapes and designs. The simplest were small clay vessels, their surfaces plain, their function straightforward. But many were decorated, stamped with patterns or molded into figures. Some bore images of animals, a leaping dolphin, a proud eagle, or a gentle dove. Others carried scenes from myths, Hercules wrestling a lion, Venus rising from the sea, or Apollo with his lyre. Even in darkness, the Romans surrounded themselves with stories, letting their lamps remind them of gods, heroes, and the world beyond their own. For the wealthy, lamps were more than tools. They were statements of taste and refinement. Bronze lamps hung from chains in atriums, their polished surfaces gleaming. Some were fitted with multiple spouts, allowing several flames to burn at once, filling large rooms with light. Others stood on tall bases, like slender trees with glowing fruit. In these houses, light was plentiful, casting steady warmth across marble floors, mosaics, and painted walls. Guests reclining at evening banquets might watch the flames dance across silver cups and polished platters, adding to the atmosphere of comfort and elegance. But for most Romans, light was modest and precious. A single clay lamp might serve an entire household, its flame guarded carefully. Oil was not cheap, and to let a lamp burn wastefully was a luxury many could not afford. Families learned to make their light last, trimming the wick to keep the flame from consuming too much oil. The lamp might be placed on a small shelf, high enough to cast its glow across the room, or carried by hand to guide someone through narrow stairs and dark corridors. The oil itself was usually olive oil, the same used for cooking and anointing. Its scent was familiar, earthy, and slightly sharp. When burned, it gave off a faint fragrance that mixed with the air of every Roman street at night. Sometimes the oil was perfumed, especially in wealthier homes, so that the light itself carried a trace of luxury. Imagine a room where the glow of lamps is accompanied by the sweet smell of rose or cinnamon, softening the edges of the evening and making the very air feel rich. In temples, the lamps carried deeper meaning. Priests lit them as offerings, their flames a symbol of eternal devotion. The goddess Vesta, keeper of the sacred flame, was honored with fire that was never allowed to die. To extinguish a lamp in her temple would have been a dreadful omen, a sign of neglect or disaster. In private shrines within homes, small lamps flickered before statues of the household gods. Families prayed by their glow, trusting that the light would guard them through the darkness. The city itself had its own relationship with lamplight. Street corners were fitted with torches or larger lamps, tended by slaves or watchmen. These did not make the streets bright in the way modern lights do, but they created pools of visibility, islands of safety in the sea of shadow. Walking from one to the next, you would pass through stretches of near blackness, the stars above your only guide, until the next circle of fire welcomed you in. To walk Rome at night was to walk through a patchwork of light and dark, flame and shadow. The lamps themselves made their own sounds. A faint hiss as the oil heated, the soft crackle of a wick that needed trimming, the occasional pop as a droplet of water found its way into the reservoir. These tiny noises joined the chorus of nighttime Rome. Footsteps, whispers, distant music, the bark of a dog. Together, they created a texture, a reminder that even in stillness, the city was alive. Children often watched the flames with fascination. The flicker of light could cast shadows that seemed like playthings, dancing across the walls. A hand placed between the lamp and the wall became a bird, a rabbit, or a monster, delighting or frightening little ones before bed. For adults, the glow of a lamp was less playful, but no less captivating. Its steadiness was a comfort, its warmth a reminder of the boundary between home and the vast darkness outside. Poets and philosophers often wrote by lamplight. The quiet of the night, the hush of the city, and the steady flame created a space for thought. A writer might lean over a wax tablet, scratching notes with a stylus, while the flame bent and swayed beside him. The philosopher Seneca himself reflected on the late hours, noting how the silence of night sharpened the mind. For these thinkers, the lamp was not only a tool, but a companion, its gentle light a partner in their search for wisdom. Yet lamplight also carried a certain fragility. A sudden draught could extinguish it, leaving a room plunged into blackness. A clumsy hand could tip it, spilling hot oil and sparking danger. Fire was both friend and threat in Rome, a source of warmth and illumination, but also a constant hazard in the crowded wooden insulae. Families were careful with their lamps, keeping them away from straw mats or wooden beams, knowing how easily a small flame could become a devastating blaze. Despite this, the lamp was indispensable. Its glow stretched the day into the night, allowed conversations to continue, meals to be savored, prayers to be whispered, and thoughts to be written. Without it, life would have been shorter, bound strictly to the sun's rise and fall. With it, Romans carried something of the sun into their homes, a fragment of daylight caught in clay and oil. Picture yourself now in a Roman room, perhaps modest, perhaps grand. The air is quiet, the day's heat fading, the sounds of the city softened into the background. Before you, a lamp burns. Its flame is small, no higher than the length of a fingernail, but its glow fills the space. Shadows gather in corners, but do not intrude. The light touches the edges of pottery, the curve of a jug, the folds of a blanket. It flickers gently, never hurried, never loud, just steady. You watch it for a moment, your eyes tracing the rhythm of its movement. In its glow, the world feels calmer, closer, kinder. This is the gift of the oil lamp, not simply light, but a sense of presence. It connects the people of Rome to one another, to their gods, and even to us across the centuries. The same gentle glow that guided a Roman family to rest can guide you now into sleep. The lamp does not demand attention. It simply offers it, quietly, patiently, until the darkness itself feels less heavy, less vast. As the night deepens, more lamps are lit, and the city becomes a constellation of its own. Each flame is a star brought down to earth, flickering in doorways, courtyards, and temples. Together, they form a map of human life, spread across the stones of Rome, glowing softly under the eternal sky. And so the glow of oil lamps becomes more than light. It becomes memory, ritual, safety, and peace. It is the hush of evening, the warmth of home, the whisper of stories told in darkness. It is Rome, resting under the stars, its countless flames echoing the heavens above. The Forum Romanum, the beating heart of the empire, is never truly empty. In the blaze of daylight, it is a place of urgency. Senators debating in marble halls, lawyers speaking over one another, merchants calling out prices, and citizens hurrying to hear the latest decrees. But as the sun dips low and shadows lengthen, the Forum undergoes a quiet transformation. The throngs thin, the noise softens, and the grandeur of Rome's central space reveals itself in gentler light. Marble columns catch the last golden rays, reflecting them back like fading embers. Statues of gods and heroes stand tall, their outlines softened by dusk, as if even stone relaxes at the close of day. The first sensation at evening is space. By day, every corner is crowded. But in twilight, the openness is restored. The paving stones stretch ahead, glowing faintly in the last light. The Basilica Julia no longer hums with voices. The rostra, once thunderous with speeches, now sits in silence. What was a stage for politics becomes a stage for reflection. If you pause, the air itself seems quieter. There are still footsteps, a senator leaving the curia, a merchant with unsold goods, but they no longer dominate. Instead, you hear softer sounds. Pigeons fluttering to their nests, leaves rustling from the sacred fig, and the faint trickle of water from fountains that line the square. The Forum, so often the site of ambition, now hums with a calm rhythm, like a heartbeat slowing after exertion. Evening in the Forum is about balance. Here disputes were settled, justice pursued, and commerce done. At nightfall, those concerns are set aside, leaving only permanence. The stones are cooled beneath your feet. The air smells faintly of marble dust, mingled with torch smoke. A faint perfume of incense drifts from nearby temples, where priests conclude their rituals. You might walk toward the Temple of Saturn, its columns tall against the darkening sky. By day, it is a treasury. By night, its columns seem like guardians. A lamp glows faintly at its base, small against the massive stone, yet deeply reassuring. Nearby, the Temple of Vista glows with its sacred flame. Tended by the Vestal Virgins, it never goes out, and in the stillness of evening, it feels even brighter. For passers-by, it is a comfort, the knowledge that the flame, symbol of Rome's fortune, continues even as the city itself slows to rest. At dusk, statues take on a new presence. In daylight, they remind citizens of glory. In twilight, their shadows stretch long, their faces softened. They seem less like monuments to pride and more like companions. A passerby may linger, not to admire power, but to find calm in silent presence. The air cools quickly once the sun disappears. A breeze flows through colonnades, carrying the scent of gardens and the faint salt of the Tiber. Torches flicker to life, their flames small but enough to mark paths home. In this softened light, families sometimes stroll. A father points out statues to his son, recounting heroes of the Republic. A mother gathers water from fountains as children skip beside her. For them, The forum is not only politics, but part of daily life, ordinary and extraordinary at once. The forum also belongs to philosophers. When the noise of the day fades, small groups gather under porticos, their voices low, discussing virtue and the nature of the gods. A lamp glows on their faces, their words floating softly into the air. The stillness gives their thoughts weight, as though wisdom prefers the quiet hours. As the night deepens, vendors pack away their stalls. A few linger, selling wine or roasted nuts. Dogs settle at the edges of the square, lying on stones still warm from the day. Their breathing is steady, a rhythm in harmony with the quiet city. The forum is vast, yet in these hours it feels intimate. You might walk beneath the arch of Septimius Severus, its carvings faint in torchlight, or pause by the column of Focus, rising solitary against the sky. Each monument tells a story, but at twilight they seem hushed, spoken in whispers. Above, the stars spread wide. Constellations rise, mirrored faintly by scattered lamps below. For the Romans, they were gods and guides, reminders of the vastness beyond the city. To stand here, gazing upward at the eternal sky, was to feel the tension between fleeting human works and everlasting heavens. Thus the forum, stage of empire, becomes at night a place of reflection. Its grandeur softens, its ambition replaced by water, lamps, and wind. It is no longer about power, but presence, the simple fact of standing where generations have walked, now quiet under the stars. For you, wandering here in imagination, the forum offers rest. You need not argue or proclaim. Only walk slowly, listening to the hush of stones, watching shadows lengthen, and feeling the calm of a city that even in greatness must pause to breathe. The evening forum is a lullaby of marble and light, a reminder that even the busiest of places can find peace when night falls. As the evening deepens and the last light of the sun fades from the sky, Rome's bathhouses still hum quietly with life. These great complexes, known as thermae, were not only places to wash the body, but also sanctuaries of rest, health, and community. For many Romans, the bathhouse was as important to daily life as the marketplace or the forum. And at dusk, when the day's heat lingers in the stone walls, the baths take on a special atmosphere, both calming and alive. Step into the entrance of one of the larger baths, such as the baths of Caracalla or the baths of Trajan. Even from outside, you can hear the echo of voices, softened by the acoustics of vaulted ceilings and wide chambers. The doors open into a space filled with lamplight reflecting off marble floors. The air carries the mingled scents of oil, herbs, and warm water. At this hour, the bustle of the daytime crowd has lessened, and the baths become quieter, more peaceful, though still full of gentle movement. The ritual of bathing was not rushed. It was a progression, a slow journey through spaces designed to soothe the body and calm the mind. You begin in the apoditerium, the changing room, where men and women, in separate areas, or at different times of the day, remove their garments and leave them in niches along the walls. Slaves or attendants stand ready to guard clothing and assist with preparations. The room itself glows with soft lamplight, casting warm tones across the polished marble benches and painted walls. Conversations here are muted, carried in low tones as people prepare to move deeper into the baths. From the apoditerium, you pass into the frigidarium, the cold room. The pool gleams in the lamplight, its water still and clear, cool against the skin after a long day. Some step into it boldly, gasping softly as the chill wraps around them. Others ease themselves in slowly, allowing the freshness to rise inch by inch. The cold awakens the senses, sharpens the breath, and clears the mind. The sound of splashes echoes against the high ceiling, then fades into stillness as bathers emerge, refreshed and invigorated. From the cool, the journey moves toward warmth. The tepidarium awaits, a chamber of gentle heat. The air here is warm and comforting, heavy with moisture. Marble benches line the walls, inviting bathers to recline and let their muscles relax. Attendants move quietly, offering oils scented with lavender or myrtle, massaging tired shoulders and limbs. The lamplight shimmers on the damp surfaces, and the gentle sound of dripping water blends with the low murmur of voices. This is the place to pause, to breathe slowly, and to let the day's fatigue dissolve. Beyond lies the caldarium, the hot room. Here the heat is intense, the air heavy with steam. A great pool of hot water glows in the flickering light, its surface clouded with vapor. To step into it is to feel the body surrender, muscles loosening, joints easing, the warmth sinking deep into the bones. The sound of water lapping against the sides of the pool creates a rhythm, steady and soothing. In the mist, faces appear and vanish, voices softened into murmurs. The caldarium is a place of surrender, to warmth, to rest, to the comfort of letting go. Yet the bathhouse was more than pools. Alongside them, special rooms offered different experiences. The sudatorium, a steam room, filled with thick clouds of vapor that wrapped around the body, cleansing and purifying. The laconicum, a dry, hot chamber, allowed bathers to sweat freely, ridding themselves of the day's burdens. Afterward, attendants would scrape the skin with strigils, curved bronze tools, removing oil, dirt, and sweat. The sensation was at once strange and satisfying, a physical renewal, a shedding of the weight of the day. The baths were also places of gathering. Even in the quiet of evening, conversations flowed easily. Friends met to discuss news, philosophy, or poetry. Merchants exchanged stories of trade, soldiers spoke of distant provinces, and philosophers pondered the mysteries of the stars. The calm atmosphere of twilight made these conversations gentler, less hurried than those of the day. Voices echoed softly beneath the high arches, blending into a harmony that was more hum than clamor. Walk further into the complex, and you find gardens attached to the baths. In the cool night air, fountains murmur, and statues stand among carefully arranged paths. The scent of cypress and rosemary drifts on the breeze. Couples stroll slowly, enjoying the calm after their baths. Children play quietly under the watchful eyes of parents. The gardens, lit by scattered torches, feel like an extension of the heavens themselves, small stars on earth to match the great constellations above. Evening at the baths carried another kind of beauty, the interplay of light and shadow. The glow of oil lamps and torches reflected in the pools, shimmering across the marble walls, creating the illusion of rippling stone. Steam rose like a veil, softening every outline, turning the chamber into a dreamlike space. To move through it was to walk in a world halfway between water and air, body and spirit. For many, the baths were the end of the day. After leaving the caldarium, bathers might be anointed with oils, their skin rubbed smooth, their hair combed. Some would recline in the lounges nearby, sipping diluted wine, nibbling on fruit or nuts. Others would simply wrap themselves in linen and step out into the cool night, their bodies warm and refreshed, their minds calmed. The baths prepared them for sleep, easing the transition from the noise of the day to the quiet of the night. But for others, the baths were only a pause before more activity. Some left to join friends at taverns, carrying the glow of relaxation with them. Others returned to their homes, ready to share the evening meal with family. The baths connected every part of Roman life, weaving together hygiene, health, leisure, and society. Listen closely, and you can imagine the sounds of a Roman bathhouse at night. The gentle splash of water as someone enters a pool, the low hum of conversation, the scrape of a strigil across skin, the clink of a jug set down on marble, the soft laugh of friends sharing a story. These sounds echo through the halls, carried upward into the vaulted ceilings, blending into a lullaby of daily life. The Romans believed deeply in the connection between body and spirit, and the baths embodied this belief. To cleanse the skin was to refresh the soul. To relax the muscles was to calm the mind. At night, under the glow of lamps and the hush of twilight, this connection felt even stronger. The baths became a place where the body prepared for rest, where the spirit found balance, and where the city itself seemed to pause. Imagine leaving the baths now. The doors open, and the cool night air greets you. Your skin still glows with warmth. Your body feels lighter, your mind quieter. Behind you, the lamps of the bathhouse flicker, their glow a beacon against the darkness. Ahead, the streets stretch into shadow, lined with faint pools of lamplight. You breathe deeply, the scent of oil and herbs still clinging to you, the sound of distant water murmuring in your ears. Rome at night is vast and full of life, but within you is the calm carried from the baths. Each step feels slower, each breath deeper, each moment gentler. The city may still move around you, but you walk as though in a dream, ready to drift toward rest. The bathhouses at dusk are more than places of cleansing. They are sanctuaries, temples of water and light, where the day is washed away and the night begins in peace. In their warmth, Rome finds renewal. In their calm, Rome finds sleep. The city of Rome may have been grand, filled with temples, arches, and public spaces, but the heart of the city beat quietly inside its homes. As night descended and the streets darkened under the flicker of torches, families withdrew into their dwellings, some modest, some magnificent, each carrying its own rhythm of evening life. To step inside a Roman home at dusk is to glimpse not the empire at large, but the tender and ordinary details of human living. There were many kinds of homes in Rome, each telling its own story. The wealthy patricians reclined in expansive domus, elegant houses built around open courtyards, their walls decorated with frescoes, their floors laid with mosaics that gleamed in lamplight. Most Romans lived in insulae, tall apartment blocks that lined crowded streets, filled with the sounds and smells of many families side by side. Both reveal the way Romans lived after the day's labors, how they sought rest, warmth, and comfort before sleep. Step first into a domus, one of the grand houses of Rome's elite. As the evening cools the air, the front doors open into the atrium, where the family shrine glows with tiny lamps before the household gods. The pool, the impluvium, catches the reflection of the stars above, shimmering softly in the darkness. Slaves move quietly, setting lamps along corridors, their flames mirrored in polished bronze vessels and glass. The household begins to settle into its evening rhythm, preparing for cena, the main meal of the day. The dining room, or triclinium, fills with soft light. Cushions are arranged around low tables, food set out on silver and bronze platters. Roasted meats, vegetables with herbs, fruits from orchards. Wine is mixed with water in jugs, poured into cups that catch the lamplight. Voices are gentle, laughter from guests, murmured conversation, the low notes of a flute. In the glow, painted walls come alive, mythological scenes, landscapes, and animals flicker as the flames shift. The domus is a world unto itself, enclosed and serene, a sanctuary of order and beauty against the vastness of the city. After the meal, the family lingers. Some retire to the peristyle garden, a courtyard filled with plants, fountains, and statues. The air is cool, scented with roses and cypress. Water murmurs in stone basins, its sound blending with the distant call of night birds. Others withdraw to quieter rooms, where lamps burn beside beds. The domus at night is calm, its many rooms glowing like separate stars, each holding its own story of rest. Now step into an insula, the apartment blocks where most Romans lived. These buildings rose several stories high, their upper levels often dark and cramped. As night falls, windows glow faintly with lamplight, their small flames marking where families gather. Inside, rooms are modest, a single space shared by parents and children, or perhaps 2 or 3 small chambers, their plaster walls plain, their floors simple. Yet even in these humble spaces, the rhythm of evening carries warmth. In one insula, a mother stirs a pot over a small fire, its smoke drifting out the window. Lentils simmer with garlic and herbs, filling the room with fragrance. Children sit on the floor, playing with carved wooden toys, their laughter echoing against narrow walls. The father returns from work, setting down a jug of wine, his shoulders easing as he joins his family. Their voices rise together, sometimes overlapping, sometimes pausing for a shared laugh. The lamplight flickers across their faces, casting shadows that make the room feel alive. Above them, another family shares bread and cheese at a plank set on stools. Their laughter is loud, carrying through thin walls. In another apartment, a baby cries softly, soothed by a lullaby sung in gentle tones, a melody weaving through the night air. The insula is crowded, its walls thin, but the closeness creates a tapestry of voices, different families, different lives, blending into a single hum of human presence. The insulae could be precarious places. Fires were a constant danger, and the buildings sometimes leaned with age. Yet at night, when lamps glowed in every window, they became beacons of community. The glow of dozens of flames marked the presence of hundreds of lives, each flame a star in the constellation of the city. From the street, to look up at an insula at night was to see a living building, pulsing with light, sound, and warmth. Both domus and insula shared certain customs of the night. Prayers were offered to the household gods. Small altars, called lauraria, stood in corners or niches, decorated with tiny statues of the Lares and Penates, guardians of family and hearth. Lamps burned before them, and families offered bits of food or wine, whispering words of gratitude and hope. These quiet rituals linked the living to their ancestors, the present to the divine, turning the home itself into sacred space. Children were often lulled to sleep with stories. Parents or grandparents told tales of heroes and gods, of adventures across seas and lands. The glow of the lamp flickered as the stories unfolded, shadows dancing on the walls, as if the myths themselves had come alive. Some children drifted to sleep quickly, their dreams carried by the voices of their elders. Others listened with wide eyes until their lids grew heavy, their imaginations still roaming long after their bodies surrendered to rest. In wealthier homes, beds were often placed in cubicula, small, private rooms adorned with painted walls and fine furnishings. In humbler homes, mats of straw or wool were spread on the floor, shared by entire families. Yet whether on fine couches or simple pallets, Romans ended their days in the same way, gathering close to those they loved, the light of a single lamp fading into darkness. The night sounds of Roman homes were many. The creak of beams, the muffled steps of neighbors above or below, the bark of a dog in the courtyard, answered by another, the soft snore of a family member, steady and reassuring, all became part of the lullaby of the city. Outside, Rome continued. The streets echoed faintly with the steps of watchmen, distant laughter from taverns, the rumble of carts making late deliveries. But inside the homes, the world narrowed to lamplight, family, and rest. Imagine yourself inside one of these homes, perhaps reclining in the peristyle garden of a domus, listening to the murmur of a fountain beneath the stars. Or perhaps in a crowded insula, sharing bread with neighbors, laughter echoing against the walls. Wherever you are, the feeling is the same. Belonging, shelter, the day drawing gently to a close. The greatness of Rome may have been built in forums and temples, but its life was sustained in these homes, where families gathered, where children dreamed, where prayers were whispered, and where sleep finally came. The city, vast and eternal, was also intimate and fragile, and it was in the quiet of its homes that its people found rest. The lamps burn lower, the voices fade, the night deepens, and Rome, behind its doors and walls, settles into dreams. As the lamps are lit and families return from the streets, the aroma of food begins to drift through every corner of Rome. The evening meal, called cena, was the centerpiece of the Roman day, not just nourishment for the body, but also an occasion for company, conversation, and ritual. At nightfall, when the city's energy softened into gentler rhythms, tables both grand and humble came alive with the sounds and scents of dining. In the homes of the wealthy, cena was an elaborate affair. Imagine entering the triclinium, the formal dining room of a patrician's domus. Lamps flicker against frescoed walls, their golden glow illuminating scenes of myths, landscapes, and delicate patterns painted centuries earlier. Mosaics underfoot sparkle with fragments of colored stone, depicting dolphins, birds, or vines. Along 3 couches, guests recline in the Roman fashion, leaning on one elbow, their sandals resting lightly on cushions. At the center, low tables gleam with polished wood and bronze, set with platters of food prepared in kitchens bustling with slaves. The meal begins with gustatio, the appetizers. Dishes are carried in, olives glistening with oil, eggs boiled and seasoned with garum, the pungent fish sauce so beloved of the Romans. There may be fresh salads, cucumbers dressed with vinegar, or small cakes of cheese and honey. Cups of watered wine are passed around, their surfaces catching the lamplight. Conversation flows easily here, laughter rising gently, stories exchanged in a rhythm as natural as breathing. From there, the prima mensa, the main course, is served. Platters arrive with roasted meats, pork, lamb, or perhaps game birds seasoned with herbs. Fish may be offered, steamed in fragrant leaves, its aroma filling the room. Stews of lentils or chickpeas bubble in clay bowls, enriched with leeks and onions. Bread, fresh from the ovens, is torn and shared. For the wealthy, exotic delicacies sometimes appear, oysters brought from distant coasts or fruits carried in from far provinces. Each dish is a mark of status as much as flavor, yet beneath the show, it is still the warmth of food and the joy of company that shape the evening. The secunda mensa, dessert, closes the meal with sweetness. Bowls of figs, grapes, and pomegranates are passed around. Honey cakes appear, their fragrance rich and inviting. Nuts are cracked open, their shells tossed lightly into baskets. Wine is poured more freely now, conversations lingering as the night grows deeper. Musicians may play quietly in the corner, the notes of a flute weaving gently through the voices. In some houses, poetry is recited, or a guest might share a story. The triclinium becomes a stage for friendship and art as much as food. But most Romans did not dine in such splendor. In the insulae, the crowded apartments of the city, the evening meal was far simpler, yet no less precious. A family gathers around a small wooden table, or perhaps sits together on the floor. A pot of lentils or barley stew simmers on the hearth, flavored with garlic, herbs, and whatever scraps of meat or fish they could afford. Bread, coarse and hearty, is broken and dipped into the stew. A jug of cheap wine is shared, perhaps diluted with water drawn from a nearby fountain. Children laugh between mouthfuls, their faces lit by the flicker of a single lamp. The food may be plain, but the comfort it brings is rich. In these modest homes, dessert might be little more than an apple, a handful of dried dates, or a small cake sweetened with honey. Yet the simplicity carries its own beauty. The focus is not on show, but on closeness, the nearness of voices, the warmth of family, the shared act of eating together at the close of day. Across Rome, taverns also offered their own kind of evening meal. Their doors opened to the street, their interiors lit by smoky torches. Inside, wooden tables were crowded with patrons, workers seeking food after long labor, travelers resting from their journeys, friends meeting to talk. Bowls of hot stew were served, thick and filling, often flavored strongly with garum. Loaves of bread were sliced and set out, jugs of wine poured generously. The air was lively, full of laughter, the clatter of dice, the murmur of songs. For many, the tavern was a second home, a place to end the day in the company of strangers who became companions. The night meal was not only about eating, it was also about ritual. In many households, a small portion of food was set aside for the lares and penetes, the household gods. A few drops of wine might be poured at their shrine, a piece of bread placed before their statues. This act of gratitude tied the meal to the divine, linking the family's table with the unseen forces believed to protect them. Even the simplest homes found comfort in this gesture, a reminder that their lives were part of something larger. The sounds of Senna varied depending on where you were. In grand houses, the murmur of conversation was punctuated by bursts of laughter, the soft notes of music, the clink of silverware against plates. In insulae, the noises overlapped, children talking over one another, neighbors shouting greetings across thin walls, the scrape of bowls and the creak of wooden benches. In taverns, the sounds swelled into a chorus, dice rattling, voices rising in song, jugs striking tabletops. Together, these sounds formed the symphony of Rome at dinner, a citywide song of sustenance and fellowship. And yet, when the meal ended, the mood shifted. In wealthier homes, guests might linger for hours, reclining as lamps burned low, sipping wine and telling stories. In humbler apartments, families tidied their spaces, setting bowls aside, tucking children into bed. Taverns gradually emptied, their doors closing, their laughter fading into the night. The act of eating had been both an ending and a beginning, the close of the day's labors and the opening to the stillness of night. Imagine yourself at one of these meals. Perhaps you recline among painted walls, the aroma of roasted meat and honey cakes filling the air, your cup of wine glowing in lamplight. Or perhaps you sit cross-legged on the floor of an insula, dipping bread into stew, the laughter of children ringing in your ears. Or maybe you are in a lively tavern, a bowl of hot food before you, the warmth of strangers around you, songs echoing into the street. Each scene is different, yet each holds the same truth. Food binds people together, and the night meal in Rome was an anchor of rest. As the lamps dim and the tables are cleared, Rome itself grows quieter. The streets carry the fading scent of stews and bread, mingling with the smoke of torches. The city exhales once more, its countless homes settling into peace. The night meal, whether simple or splendid, has been shared. Hunger is eased, voices are softened, and the body prepares for rest. The greatness of Rome is often told through battles and monuments, but just as real is this simple rhythm of daily life. Families eating together under lamplight, bellies warmed by stew, spirits lifted by companionship. The empire may have stretched across the known world, but each evening, within its walls, Romans found comfort in the same way we do, by sharing food, laughter, and love before sleep. The empire of Rome was vast, its armies powerful, its senators ambitious, but within the walls of every home, another world unfolded, the world of children. As night fell over the city and the stars began to glow above the rooftops, Roman children settled into their own evening rituals. Some played a little longer before being called inside. Some begged for one more story, while others, already drowsy, curled against their mothers and drifted away. To understand Rome at night is to glimpse these smaller lives, tender and fragile, where sleep carried the promise of safety and dreams. Children in Rome lived in many kinds of homes, the grand domus of patrician families, the crowded insulae of artisans and laborers, the villas scattered across the countryside. No matter the setting, the patterns of evening carried familiar rhythms. Parents, weary from the day, watched over their little ones, guiding them through the small rituals that prepared them for rest. In wealthier households, children often had their own small rooms, cubicula set off from the main corridors. The walls were sometimes painted with bright colors, flowers, birds, or mythological scenes to delight young imaginations. Lamps glowed on small tables, their light softened by bronze or glass covers. Slaves or attendants moved quietly, tidying the space, bringing fresh linens, or laying out small toys carved from ivory or wood. The atmosphere was one of comfort, intended to ease children into sleep with gentleness. In humbler apartments, children often shared space with parents and siblings. Straw mattresses or woolen blankets were spread across the floor, and the family crowded close together in the flickering light of a single lamp. The walls were plain, the rooms narrow, but the closeness itself was a comfort. Children fell asleep listening to the sound of familiar breathing, the rhythm of voices they knew best. In these spaces, love was measured not in luxury, but in presence. Before sleep, children were often told stories. Rome was rich with myths and legends, and these tales served not only to entertain, but also to teach. A father might tell the story of Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of the city, raised by a she-wolf. A mother might speak of Hercules, whose strength overcame monsters, or of Odysseus, whose cleverness carried him safely through dangers. These stories connected children to their heritage, teaching them courage, cleverness, and faith in the gods. Sometimes, instead of myths, the stories were simpler: family tales, memories of grandparents, or quiet lessons about kindness and honesty. A grandparent might describe their own childhood, weaving memory and imagination together. The lamplight flickered as the story unfolded, shadows moving across the walls like the figures in the tale. Children listened with wide eyes until sleep tugged gently at them, their dreams already filled with images of wolves, heroes, or distant seas. Music, too, often soothed children to rest. Mothers sang lullabies in gentle tones, melodies passed down through generations. The songs might be simple: a repeated phrase, a soft chant, a rhythm that matched the rocking of a cradle. In some homes, flutes or lyres played softly, their notes floating like whispers through the room. The sound was not grand or formal, but intimate, meant to quiet restless minds and guide little hearts toward dreams. Toys lay beside sleeping children, waiting for morning. Dolls made of cloth or ivory, carved animals, or small wooden carts were treasured possessions. For wealthier children, toys might be decorated or painted, while poorer families made playthings from whatever materials they could find: a clay figurine, a bundle of rags, or a pebble polished smooth. At night, these toys rested beside their owners, silent companions that carried comfort into sleep. The household gods, the lares and penedes, also watched over children. Families often prayed for their safety, placing offerings at shrines within the home. A drop of wine, a piece of bread, a whispered prayer. All were meant to ensure that the little ones were protected through the night. The belief in divine guardianship gave parents peace, and children, even if unaware, slept under the weight of blessings older than memory. In the countryside, the rhythms of night carried a different texture. Villas were quieter, the sounds of nature louder. Children there fell asleep to the chirping of crickets, the distant call of owls, the rustle of leaves stirred by evening breezes. Windows were left open to the cool air, the smell of fields drifting inside. The stars shone more brightly here, their constellations a canopy above wide stretches of farmland. A child might fall asleep, gazing upward, counting the stars until dreams overtook them. Not every Roman child knew peace, of course. Many were born into slavery, their evenings shaped by labor and obedience. Yet even for them, moments of gentleness existed. A kind nurse might sing softly to a small child, or a fellow slave might carve a tiny toy to offer comfort. Human tenderness persisted, even in hardship. Sleep itself was a gift, offering rest from toil, a brief escape into dreams where freedom might be imagined. The night also carried its superstitions. Romans believed in spirits that wandered in the dark, some protective, others less so. To guard against harm, amulets were often placed near children. A small charm of bronze, shaped like a hand or an animal, might hang over a cradle. Pieces of coral were thought to ward off evil. These objects, simple or elaborate, gave parents reassurance that unseen dangers would be kept away from their little ones. As children drifted into sleep, the sounds of their breathing filled the home. In wealthier houses, the hush was broken only by the faint crackle of a lamp. In insulae, the sound mingled with neighbors' voices through thin walls, dogs barking in courtyards, or footsteps in the street below. Yet within the space of the family, the child was cocooned in safety, their small form wrapped in blankets, their face softened by dreams. Dreams themselves held meaning in Roman culture. Parents might watch a sleeping child and wonder at the movements of their eyes, the murmurs from their lips. Was the child visited by the gods? Were the dreams omens of future greatness, or warnings to be heeded? Romans often believed that dreams carried messages, and so even the sleep of children was woven into the fabric of faith and mystery. Imagine yourself now in a Roman household at night. The lamps glow low, their flames flickering against plaster walls. A child lies curled beneath a woolen blanket, their toy resting beside them. A mother hums softly, her voice no louder than a whisper, until the child's breathing steadies. Outside, the stars shine above the city, constant and eternal. Inside, the warmth of family fills the air. You watch as eyelids close, as the child drifts into dreams, and the room itself seems to grow calmer, quieter, slower. This was the nightly rhythm of Rome. Children lulled into sleep by stories, songs, and love. The empire stretched across continents, but in each household, the most precious empire was a child's dream. The greatness of Rome rested not only in its armies or temples, but in the tender act of parents ensuring their children's rest. In those moments, the world outside, the battles, the politics, the noise, fell away, leaving only the soft glow of a lamp, the steady breath of a child, and the peace of night. And so, as the city settled, the children of Rome slept safe in their homes, guarded by gods and parents alike, their dreams carrying them gently into the mysteries of another world. When most of Rome drifted into slumber, another world awakened. Though the city seemed to quiet, its life never ceased. Night belonged not only to rest, but to work, to bakers kneading bread by lamplight, taverns humming with late laughter, guards patrolling the shadows, and countless others whose labor sustained the empire while the majority slept. To walk through Rome at night was to step into this hidden world, where the glow of torches revealed lives lived in silence and shadow. Begin with the bakers, for their work was the heartbeat of the Roman night. Bread was the foundation of the Roman diet, and by dawn, loaves had to be ready for sale in markets and stalls across the city. In the small hours, long before the first rooster crowed, the pistrina, the bakeries, came alive. Flames roared in their ovens, heating the great stone chambers until they glowed red with heat. The air filled with the scent of flour, yeast, and smoke. Inside, bakers bent over heavy wooden tables, their hands white with flour, kneading dough in steady rhythms. Slaves turned great mills powered by donkeys, grinding grain into flour. Others shoveled coals, kept the fires alive, or carried trays of rising loaves. The sounds were a mix of effort and industry, the slap of dough on wood, the grind of stone, the crackle of fire. Outside, the streets lay quiet, but within the bakery, the night was alive with energy. By dawn, the bread was ready, round loaves marked with dividing lines, crusts golden and crisp. They would be carried out into the waking city, feeding senators and laborers alike. Yet all of this depended on the silent labor of the night, on men and women who worked unseen while the rest of Rome dreamed. Step away from the bakeries, and you might find yourself before a tavern, its door still open, its torches sputtering against the dark. Taverns, or popinae, were often busiest at night. Inside, The air was thick with the smell of wine and stew. Wooden tables were crowded with patrons, workers who lingered after long days, travelers stopping for rest, or gamblers chasing fortune with dice and chance. The clatter of cups and the roll of dice echoed in the smoky air. Wine flowed freely, often rough and sour, but mixed with spices or honey to soften its edge. Bowls of lentil stew or roasted meat were set down, filling hungry stomachs. Musicians sometimes played, a flute, a drum, or the pluck of a lyre, their tunes weaving through the voices. The tavern was no palace, but it offered warmth, companionship, and distraction. For some, it was a place of joy. For others, an escape. The streets outside the taverns carried their own kind of life. Lanterns swung from doorways, casting shadows across the paving stones. Drunken voices rose in laughter or song, echoing off the walls of insulae. Dogs barked, chasing after the noise. A passerby might move quickly, head down, avoiding the chaos, for though Rome's nightlife was lively, it was not always safe. That is why the city had its night watch. Known as the vigils, these men patrolled the streets with torches and staves. Their duties were many: keeping peace, deterring thieves, extinguishing fires. Fires, above all, were the great fear of Rome's knights. With so many wooden insulae packed tightly together, a single spark could consume an entire neighborhood. The vigils carried water buckets and hooks, always ready to respond to cries of alarm. Their footsteps echoed in the quiet streets. The torchlight illuminated their armor and cast long shadows behind them. They moved in groups, speaking in low voices, watching for trouble. Some citizens greeted them with relief, others with suspicion. Yet their presence gave the night its fragile sense of order, reminding the city that even in darkness, it was not abandoned. Other workers, too, shaped the Roman night. The water carriers, who filled jugs and delivered them to households, moved silently from fountain to fountain. Night cleaners swept debris from the streets, pushing dust into piles to be carted away. Porters carried loads across the city, their backs bent beneath sacks of grain or amphorae of wine. Couriers delivered messages that could not wait until morning, their sandals slapping against the stones as they hurried through the lamplit alleys. And then there were those who labored at the city's edges, tanners working hides, fishermen mending nets by the Tiber, farmers arriving early with carts of produce for the morning market. Rome's size and appetite meant that work never truly stopped. Even under the stars, the empire's pulse beat steadily, carried by the hands of those who toiled unseen. Not all night work was labor. Some found their livelihood in entertainment or vice. Street performers lingered in taverns, juggling or singing for coins. Prostitutes walked the darker streets, their figures faintly visible in the torchlight, calling softly to passers-by. Fortune-tellers whispered promises of fate and future, reading omens by lamplight. These figures lived in the margins of respectability, yet they too belonged to the rhythm of the Roman night. The sounds of this world were distinct: the steady grind of mills, the hiss of ovens, the crackle of torches, the murmur of voices in taverns, the bark of dogs, the call of watchmen. Together, they created a nocturnal symphony, layered and continuous, a quieter but no less vital counterpart to the roar of the day. Imagine walking these streets. The air is cool, carrying the scent of bread baking, smoke drifting, wine spilled. The torches flicker, casting uncertain light. You pass a bakery, its doorway glowing, the smell of fresh loaves enveloping you. A tavern nearby hums with laughter, its noise spilling into the street. Then, turning a corner, you step into stillness, the quiet rhythm of sandals from the watchman, the distant murmur of the river. The city feels different at night, less majestic, more human. The monuments and temples fade into shadow, their grandeur softened. What remains are the lives of workers, their labor unseen but essential. Rome's power rested not only on emperors and senators, but also on bakers who fed its people, guards who kept its streets safe, and countless others whose toil filled the hours when most slept. By the time dawn approached, the results of their work were everywhere. Bread filled baskets in the markets. The streets were swept. The fountains were full. Families woke to homes that had been made safer, cleaner, and ready for another day. The night workers withdrew, their tasks complete, blending back into the city as the morning crowd stirred. For those awake in the small hours, Rome's night offered a different kind of beauty. The silence between footsteps, the glow of lamps reflecting in puddles, the sight of the stars above the rooftops, mirrored by the small flames of torches below. To walk there was to feel both the weight and the wonder of a city that never truly slept. And so the night workers of Rome carried the city through its most vulnerable hours. While others dreamed, they labored. While others rested, they watched, cooked, cleaned, guarded, and created. Their work was the quiet thread that tied day to night, ensuring that Rome, vast, eternal Rome, could rise again with the sun. Every city has its own voice, a constant song made up of countless smaller sounds. Rome, the great capital of the ancient world, was no different. By day, its voice was thunderous. Markets shouting with bargains, politicians declaiming from the rostra, hammers striking anvils, and crowds surging through the forum. But at night, when lamps glowed and most citizens drifted into rest, the city did not fall silent. Instead, its voice softened into a different song, a tapestry of small layered sounds that revealed another side of life. To lie awake in Rome at night was to hear the city breathe. Some sounds were gentle, almost comforting, while others hinted at danger or unrest. Together, they created the atmosphere of an eternal city, alive even under the stars. The first sound was always footsteps, sandals striking stone, slow and steady, carried through the narrow streets. The rhythm changed with the walker. A soldier's tread was firm, measured, confident. A weary laborer shuffled home with uneven steps, dragging one foot slightly behind the other. Lovers, arm in arm, walked lightly, their steps falling close together, quickened by laughter. Sometimes footsteps echoed alone, sometimes overlapped in clusters, like voices in conversation. In the quiet of night, they seemed louder than in the bustle of day, each step a reminder that Rome never truly slept. Dogs were another voice in the chorus. They roamed the streets freely, some guarding workshops or courtyards, others scavenging near taverns or bakeries. Their barking rang out suddenly, sharp against the stillness. One bark called forth another, until entire neighborhoods seemed to converse in canine voices. Sometimes the bark softened into low growls, warning off intruders. Other times they turned playful, as dogs chased one another in the moonlight. For Romans lying awake in their beds, the barking was both familiar and unpredictable, part of the living pulse of the city. From the courtyards and fountains came the sound of water. Rome was a city built on aqueducts, its lifeblood carried from distant hills. Even at night, the fountains flowed steadily. Water trickled from carved stone mouths into basins, filling jars or spilling over the edges to splash on the paving stones. The sound was soft, constant, soothing, like the heartbeat of the city. In wealthier homes, indoor fountains whispered in gardens, their ripples catching lamplight. For Romans, the murmur of water was a reminder of abundance, of order, and of the gods who gave them life. But not all sounds were gentle. Carts still rumbled through the streets at night. Though laws forbade heavy wagons from moving during the day, night offered freedom for transport. The wooden wheels clattered against the stones, iron rims ringing sharply in the dark. The creak of axles joined the bray of mules or donkeys, their hooves striking rhythm against the pavement. For those living in insulae above the streets, the noise was unavoidable, shaking walls and disturbing dreams. Yet it was a necessary sound, the proof of commerce, of Rome feeding itself, even in darkness. The voices of taverns carried into the night as well. Songs rose from open doors, rough and cheerful, accompanied by the rattle of dice or the clink of cups. Laughter broke out suddenly, then faded into murmurs. Sometimes arguments erupted, sharp and loud, only to be muffled again as doors slammed or voices drifted further down the street. To pass by such a tavern was to step briefly into its world of warmth and noise before returning to the cooler silence beyond. There were softer sounds, too, almost hidden. A child whimpering in a dream, hushed quickly by a parent's soothing voice. A lullaby sung in gentle tones, carrying through an open window. The rustle of straw as someone shifted on their bed. These household sounds blended with the larger noises of the city, weaving intimacy into the fabric of the night. The watchmen, the vigils, added their own presence to the soundscape. Their footsteps echoed in groups, torches crackling as they passed. Sometimes they called out to one another. Short words exchanged across the dark. When danger struck, a thief caught, a fire sparked, their voices rose sharply, breaking the stillness with urgency. Buckets of water splashed, orders rang out, and for a time the city's song became a cry of alarm. But once the danger passed, the quiet returned, the torches hissed, and the vigils resumed their steady patrols. Animals beyond dogs also spoke in the night. Roosters sometimes crowed too early, confused by lamplight or the moon. Donkeys brayed, startled or restless. Cats prowled along rooftops, their cries eerie in the dark. Owls called from trees on the city's edge, their haunting notes believed by some to be omens. Each sound tied Rome not only to human life, but to the natural rhythms that surrounded it, a reminder that even the empire's capital was still part of the wider world of nature. The wind was a quieter participant. It whispered through alleys, rattling shutters and stirring the flames of torches. In winter, it carried a sharp bite, howling through gaps in insulae walls. In summer, it was softer, a relief after the heat of the day, carrying the scent of flowers from gardens or smoke from distant fires. For many Romans lying awake, the wind's song was the backdrop of the night, gentle, restless, and eternal. Sometimes the city offered moments of near silence. In the hours before dawn, when taverns had emptied, carts had paused, and most families slept deeply, Rome seemed to hold its breath. The fountains still murmured, the occasional dog still barked, but the overall voice of the city quieted to a hush. In these rare moments, one might almost imagine the city itself sleeping, its energy banked like a fire, awaiting the sun. For philosophers, poets, and dreamers, these sounds were more than noise. They were symbols. The barking of dogs spoke of vigilance, the trickling of fountains, of abundance and order, the rumble of carts, of commerce and empire, the laughter of taverns, of joy amid hardship. To listen at night was to hear the life of Rome distilled into fragments, each sound a thread in the city's endless song. Imagine yourself now in the upper floor of an insula, lying on a straw mattress as you listen. The walls are thin, and you hear the footsteps of your neighbors above. A dog barks in the courtyard, answered by another down the street. A cart rattles by, its wheels striking sparks against the stone. Then comes silence, broken only by the trickle of a fountain and the soft breath of your family sleeping beside you. These are not disturbances, but lullabies of the city, sounds that remind you that you are not alone. Or picture yourself in a villa garden, reclining on a couch beneath the stars. The wind rustles through the cypress trees. Water splashes in a marble fountain. A servant passes quietly, setting a lamp beside you. From far away, you hear faint laughter from a tavern, softened by distance. The night seems vast and still, yet full of subtle movement, each sound like a note in a symphony composed by the city itself. Rome at night was never silent, but it was always alive. Its sounds, though sometimes harsh, carried familiarity and rhythm. They reminded its people that life continued around them, that the city never ceased to breathe. For some, these noises disturbed sleep. For others, they offered comfort, the steady reassurance that the world continued, even in darkness. The greatness of Rome can be seen in its monuments and remembered in its history, but it can also be heard in its sounds, the simple, constant music of daily life. To listen to Rome at night is to understand it not as an empire of marble and conquest, but as a living, breathing place filled with voices, footsteps, laughter, and song. And so, as you close your eyes, imagine those sounds wrapping around you, the trickle of water, the murmur of voices, the whisper of wind. Let them soften into a lullaby, carrying you into dreams, just as they once carried the people of Rome into their nightly rest. When the last glow of sunset faded behind the hills, and the lamps of the city flickered in countless doorways, another light revealed itself above Rome, the wide, endless dome of the night sky. For the Romans, the heavens were not only a beautiful backdrop to their evenings, but also a source of meaning, guidance, and wonder. To step outside at night, to look upward from a courtyard, a villa garden, or a quiet street, was to encounter a world larger than the empire itself. The stars appeared gradually, one by one, like lamps kindled in the darkness. At first, only the brightest could be seen, Venus in the west, glowing like a jewel, or Jupiter rising higher, steady and golden. Then, as twilight deepened, constellations revealed their forms. The Great Bear stretched across the sky, its familiar shape pointing always north, a guide for travelers. Orion rose in winter, his belt of 3 stars clear even above the rooftops. The Pleiades clustered like a shimmer of light, delicate and faint, yet beloved of poets who sang of their beauty. Romans gave these stars stories, many borrowed from Greek tradition, others shaped by their own imaginations. Cassiopeia was a queen, bound to her throne of stars. Perseus carried his sword across the heavens. Hercules wrestled eternally with his labors. To gaze at the constellations was to recall myths of gods and heroes, to see human struggles and triumphs mirrored in the heavens. For a child lying awake in an insula, or for a philosopher reclining in a villa garden, the stars were storytellers, silent yet eloquent. The moon, too, held power over the Roman night. Its phases marked the passing of months, guiding festivals and rituals. A full moon cast silver light across the stones of the Forum, bright enough to walk by without lamps. Its glow softened the outlines of temples and arches, turning marble into pale, ghostly forms. A crescent moon, by contrast, seemed delicate, almost fragile, a sliver of brightness in the deep sky. Romans believed the moon carried influence over crops, tides, and even the health of the human body. To stand beneath it was to feel both awe and intimacy, as though the heavens themselves leaned closer to the earth. The planets, wandering stars, fascinated Roman observers. Unlike the fixed constellations, they moved across the sky, shifting position night by night. Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, and Venus were familiar companions, each associated with a god. Mars, red and fiery, evoked the spirit of war. Jupiter, king of the gods, shone with steady authority. Venus gleamed with beauty, patroness of love. Saturn, distant and slow, carried the weight of time itself. To watch these planets trace their paths was to see the will of the gods written in the heavens. Astrologers studied the night sky carefully, mapping the movement of stars and planets, seeking omens for the future. They believed the heavens influenced the lives of individuals and the fate of the empire. An emperor might consult an astrologer before embarking on war, a merchant before setting sail, a mother before naming her child. Though not all trusted these predictions, the belief was widespread. The sky was not random, but meaningful, a divine text to be read by those who knew its language. Yet beyond meaning, the night sky carried beauty. Imagine yourself now in a Roman peristyle garden. The torches are dim, their flames wavering in the breeze, while above you the constellations blaze in clarity. The air is cool, scented with roses and cypress. The fountain trickles gently, its water catching faint starlight. You recline on a couch, looking upward, letting your gaze wander across the heavens. The vastness stretches beyond thought, endless and silent, filling you with calm. Even in the crowded insulae, where smoke and lamps dimmed the stars, glimpses of the heavens were treasured. A child might lean out of a window, pointing at a bright star with wonder. A father might tell him its name, tracing shapes in the sky with his finger. For families who rarely left the city, the night sky was their connection to the wider world, a reminder that beyond the walls and streets, beyond the empire itself, lay a universe immeasurable. Sailors on the Tiber or the Mediterranean relied on the stars as guides. The North Star, fixed and steady, pointed the way. Constellations marked the seasons, telling when to set sail and when to stay ashore. To a sailor, the night sky was not just beauty, but necessity, a map written in light. Farmers, too, looked upward, marking the rising and setting of stars to time their planting and harvests. The heavens were both clock and calendar, shaping the rhythm of labor and rest. Poets found inspiration in the night sky. They wrote of lovers meeting under the moon, of heroes guided by stars, of gods watching from above. To them, the heavens were alive with meaning, a canvas painted by the divine. Even ordinary Romans, who may never have written a line of poetry, felt the pull of the sky. To walk home beneath the stars, to see Orion rising above the rooftops, was to feel part of something vast, eternal, and beautiful. The sounds of the city softened at night, but the sky remained constant. Dogs barked, carts rumbled, fountains murmured. Yet above all of it, the stars shone silently. Their steadiness was a comfort. Empires rose and fell, buildings crumbled, generations passed, but the constellations endured. To the Romans, this permanence was a reminder of both humility and hope. The city might seem eternal, but the heavens were truly everlasting. Superstitions surrounded the night sky as well. Shooting stars were thought to be omens, sometimes of fortune, sometimes of misfortune. Eclipses filled many with dread, the sudden darkening of the sun or moon interpreted as the anger of the gods. Yet even fear tied people closer to the heavens, reminding them that they were not separate from the cosmos, but woven into its mysteries. Imagine now standing in the Forum at night, the marble columns pale in moonlight, the paving stones silvered. The stars stretch above, vast and infinite, their light falling across the temples, the arches, the statues. You feel the silence of the heavens, immense and steady, wrapping around the city. The air is cool, your breath rising faintly as you gaze upward. For a moment, Rome seems small compared to the vastness of the cosmos, yet it is also part of it, a single spark beneath an eternal fire. For Romans, the night sky was a mirror of both grandeur and fragility. It reminded them of the gods, of fate, of time beyond human reckoning. It guided their ships, marked their seasons, and carried their dreams. Whether studied by philosophers, worshipped in ritual, or admired in silence, the heavens above Rome belonged to every citizen. And so, as the lamps burned low and families drifted into sleep, the stars continued their eternal watch. The night sky was the city's quiet companion, its endless constellations keeping vigil over domus and insulae alike. Rome may have been the heart of an empire, but above it stretched a universe greater still, infinite and eternal, offering wonder, comfort, and rest to all who looked upward. When the noise of the markets faded, when the taverns emptied, and when even the barking of dogs softened into occasional bursts, a different kind of life stirred in Rome. The night did not belong only to bakers, watchmen, and tavern-goers. It also belonged to thinkers, poets, and dreamers, those who found in the hush of evening the perfect space for words, reflection, and imagination. The city that roared by day became, at night, a gentler companion. Its sounds muted, its shadows lengthened, and within those shadows, the minds of philosophers and poets came awake. The lamplight offered enough glow to read, to write, to speak. The cool air sharpened thought, and the stillness invited introspection. For them, Rome at night was not a time to sleep, but a time to wonder. Picture a philosopher seated in a quiet portico. A single lamp burns beside him, its flame steady, casting light across his wax tablets. He writes slowly, deliberately, pausing often to listen, not to the city, but to his own mind. The night, with its calm, allows him to hear himself more clearly. Seneca once wrote of these hours, of how the silence of night made reflection sharper, more profound. To the philosopher, the city asleep around him became a reminder of life's brevity, of the fleeting nature of time, and of the need to live wisely. Philosophical schools in Rome often gathered in daylight, but many teachers and their students also found the evening hours fruitful. Beneath colonnades lit by lamps, small groups discussed virtue, justice, and the order of the cosmos. Their voices rose softly, measured, respectful, weaving ideas into the night air. Stoics reminded their listeners of self-control and resilience. Epicureans spoke of simple pleasures, of friendship and the pursuit of peace. Skeptics questioned all certainties, their laughter gentle but persistent. The atmosphere was unhurried, the night itself giving permission to linger over thoughts without distraction. Poets, too, loved the night. For them, darkness carried inspiration. The stars above, the hush of the city, the flicker of lamplight, all were muses. In these hours, verses flowed, written on papyrus or whispered aloud to friends. Catullus once sang of love and longing in the quiet of evening. Ovid imagined the gods themselves wandering beneath the moon. Virgil, though more often remembered for his epics, surely gazed at the night sky as he shaped his lines, the rhythm of Rome's evenings entering into the rhythm of his poetry. Imagine a poet reclining in the peristyle of a domus. A small group of friends sits nearby, sipping diluted wine, their faces glowing in lamplight. The poet clears his throat and begins to recite. His voice is low, melodic, carrying images of stars, rivers, and love. The listeners lean closer, drawn into the world of the poem. Outside the garden walls, Rome continues. Dogs bark, carts rumble, but within the circle of lamplight, there is only beauty. When he finishes, silence lingers, deeper than applause, a silence that honors the power of words. In more modest settings, poets still found space for their craft. An artisan might scribble verses on scraps of papyrus, lines of humor or affection meant for a friend or lover. Graffiti on Rome's walls carried fragments of poetry, jokes, prayers, laments. Even in the insulae, where rooms were small and noise pressed in, the night offered moments of quiet to compose or share words. Poetry was not only for the elite. It belonged to all who felt the tug of language and imagination. For both philosophers and poets, night offered more than silence. It offered perspective. The stars overhead, steady and eternal, contrasted with the brevity of human life. The quiet streets reminded them that even the greatest city must rest. In darkness, power seemed less imposing, pride less certain, and the eternal questions of life, death, love, and meaning more present. The tools of their work were simple. Wax tablets for notes, papyrus rolls for finished works, styluses and ink. Lamps burned nearby, their flames steady, their oil carefully tended. The scratch of stylus on wax, the rustle of papyrus, the murmur of a voice reading aloud, these were the sounds of creation. Out of such humble tools and quiet hours came ideas that shaped Rome, and through Rome, the world. Sometimes these thinkers and writers worked alone. Other times, they gathered in small symposia, evening gatherings where food, wine, and conversation blended. Guests reclined on couches, sharing simple meals as they debated philosophy or recited poetry. The mood was gentle, softened by the lateness of the hour. Wine loosened tongues, but it was the night itself that invited honesty and depth. In such moments, friends became confidants, and words became bridges across souls. Even those who were not professional philosophers or poets still participated in this nightly rhythm. Ordinary Romans reflected on their lives as they lay awake, whispering thoughts to loved ones, sharing dreams, or asking questions about the gods. Soldiers stationed in the city wrote letters by lamplight, their words filled with longing for home. Merchants recorded accounts, their numbers steady in the glow of oil. The act of writing, of shaping thought in the quiet of night, was part of the city's unseen life. The night also lent itself to performance. In some households, poets entertained guests with dramatic recitations, their voices rising and falling with the rhythm of their verses. Musicians accompanied them softly, a lyre or flute weaving beneath the words. These performances were not loud or theatrical, but intimate, meant for a small circle of listeners. They carried the magic of shared experience, of words spoken and received in trust. Imagine yourself in such a gathering. The room glows with lamps, the air scented with wine and herbs. A philosopher leans forward, his voice calm as he speaks of the brevity of life, urging his listeners to live each day with purpose. Then a poet rises, reciting lines of love or longing, his words flowing like water. The listeners are silent, eyes fixed on the speaker, their hearts stirred. Outside, the city hums faintly, but inside, you are carried into a world of thought and beauty. A world where time itself seems to pause. For the Romans, the night was not only a time of sleep, it was also a time of renewal, of insight, of imagination. Philosophers sought wisdom beneath the stars. Poets found beauty in silence. Together, they gave the city a second life, quieter than the first, but no less real. Their words endured, carried forward through centuries, reminding us that the hush of night has always been fertile ground for the human spirit. And so, as Rome rested, another kind of labor continued, the labor of the mind and the heart. In lamplit rooms and shaded gardens, thoughts deepened, verses blossomed, and wisdom grew. The city of marble and power was also a city of words, nurtured in the stillness of night. The baker's bread would be gone by morning. The tavern's laughter would fade with sleep. But the words of philosophers and poets, born in these quiet hours, endured, echoing across centuries, as eternal as the stars that shone above them. When the lamps burned low and families finally settled into sleep, another world opened itself to the Romans, the world of dreams. For them, sleep was not only rest, but also a passage, a threshold where the ordinary gave way to mystery. Dreams were never taken lightly. They were seen as messages from the gods, warnings of fate, or glimpses into truths hidden from waking eyes. To lie down in Rome was to place oneself not only into the quiet of night, but into the care of powers unseen. Romans believed that dreams carried meaning. Some thought they came from the gods, sent as guidance or warning. Others believed they rose from within the human soul, revealing fears, desires, and memories. In either case, they were taken seriously, and entire texts were written to interpret them. Dream interpreters, known as critics, claimed to read the language of sleep, turning images into prophecies. To dream of water, of animals, of flight, of death. All these carried meanings, some hopeful, others fearful. In wealthy homes, when morning came, a master might recount his dreams to a trusted friend or philosopher. They would discuss the images, weighing their significance. Did the dream foretell prosperity? Did it warn of illness? Did it carry divine approval or anger? The Romans, practical in so many aspects of life, opened themselves to mystery when it came to dreams. They knew that sleep brought them into contact with forces beyond reason. Ordinary people shared their dreams too. A mother might whisper to her neighbor about the strange vision she saw in the night, wondering if it meant safety for her children or trouble ahead. A soldier, waking in the middle of the night with sweat on his brow, might pray to Mars or Jupiter, begging for clarity. In taverns, dreams were retold with laughter or with awe, depending on whether they seemed foolish or profound. Across every class of society, dreams were part of conversation, woven into the rhythm of daily life. Superstitions surrounded sleep itself. Romans often believed that the night was full of spirits, some benign, others dangerous. The Lares, the protective household gods, guarded families, but other beings, restless shades of the dead, were thought to wander in darkness. To protect against them, charms and amulets were kept close. Bronze figures shaped like hands or animals hung above beds. Coral was believed to ward off evil. Children were especially shielded, their cradles surrounded with protective symbols and whispered blessings. The placement of the bed could matter too. Some believed that lying in certain directions exposed one to troubling dreams, while other orientations invited peace. Doors and windows were sometimes left partly open, allowing fresh air to circulate and keeping away harmful spirits. The simple act of arranging a room at night carried meaning, an invisible layer of protection against the unknown. Romans often prayed before bed. They asked the gods to guard them in sleep, to grant peaceful rest, and to keep away nightmares. Offerings of wine or bread might be placed at the household shrine. Lamps were left burning near the lararium, the glow serving as both devotion and defense. In these rituals, one sees both faith and fear, the hope for divine favor and the anxiety of night's uncertainties. Nightmares were especially troubling. To dream of fire, of blood, of falling, or of shadows often filled Romans with dread. Such visions were believed to warn of misfortune or illness. To counteract them, one might recount the dream aloud upon waking, releasing its power into the air. Others sought purification rituals, bathing, or making offerings to the gods. In these ways, Romans sought to transform fear into safety, turning darkness into light. Not all dreams carried fear, of course. Some brought joy or longing. Lovers dreamed of one another, their visions filled with tenderness. Travelers dreamed of home, walking again through familiar streets. Farmers dreamed of fertile fields, their crops golden and abundant. Such dreams, too, were shared and cherished, reminders that sleep could bring happiness as well as warning. The role of temples in dreams was also important. Certain sanctuaries, especially those dedicated to healing gods like Asclepius, welcomed visitors who sought divine dreams. Worshippers slept within the temple, hoping that the god would send them a vision with guidance for their illness or troubles. These sacred dreams were considered direct communication, their instructions followed faithfully. In such spaces, sleep itself was a form of prayer. The Roman night was full of omens beyond dreams. An owl's cry could be seen as ill fortune. A sudden gust of wind at midnight might mean the gods were speaking. The flicker of a lamp, the way shadows fell across a wall, the sound of footsteps when none should be heard, all could be signs. To live in Rome was to live in a world where the unseen mattered as much as the seen, where every detail carried the weight of possibility. Superstitions also shaped the behavior of those awake at night. Some avoided stepping into dark alleys, fearing wandering spirits. Others carried charms of iron or silver to repel danger. Pregnant women were often surrounded with special protections, their beds circled with amulets to ensure safe rest. Children were told not to speak of their dreams too freely, lest evil forces twist them into curses. In this way, the unseen wove itself into the ordinary, shaping lives in subtle but powerful ways. Imagine now a Roman household at rest. The lamps burn low, their flames soft and steady. A father murmurs a prayer at the lararium, pouring a few drops of wine before extinguishing the lamp. A mother lays a coral charm near her child's bed. The family settles into quiet, their breathing steady, their bodies surrendering to the pull of sleep. Outside, the city hums faintly, a dog barking, a cart rumbling, water flowing through fountains. Inside, the world narrows to dreams. In one room, a child dreams of chasing butterflies through a meadow. In another, the father dreams of his ancestors, their faces serious, their words half heard. The mother dreams of water, a river running clear, a sign perhaps of good fortune. The dreams are vivid, real in their own way, yet fleeting. By morning, some will be remembered, others forgotten, their meanings lost to the waking world. But in the moment, they carry weight, shaping the way each person greets the day. The philosophers, of course, pondered dreams with care. Some argued that they were the language of the soul, revealing truths hidden in waking life. Others dismissed them as illusions, the mind's restless play. Yet even the skeptics admitted their power, for who could wake from a vivid dream without feeling its impact? Dreams lingered, whether believed or doubted, weaving themselves into memory and thought. The poets embraced dreams with delight. They wrote of visions granted by gods, of lovers meeting in sleep, of journeys through imagined lands. To them, dreams were another kind of poetry, a gift of the night. Their verses carried the weight of these visions, reminding their listeners that sleep was as rich a world as waking. And so, in Rome, the night was never empty. It was filled not only with footsteps, fountains, and the glow of lamps, but with the unseen voices of dreams and the whispers of superstition. The empire rested under the stars, yet each sleeper carried their own world within, a world of images, omens, fears, and hopes. To close your eyes in Rome was to open them to mystery. The bed became a threshold, the night a passage. In dreams, Romans walked with gods, spoke with the dead, or glimpsed the future. In superstitions, they guarded themselves against dangers unseen. The night was both comfort and uncertainty, its silence filled with meanings beyond words. And as dawn approached, the dreams faded. The city stirred again. Carts rumbled, dogs barked, bakers lit their ovens. Yet the memory of the night lingered. The images, the omens, the soft boundary between waking and dreaming. For Romans, as for us, sleep was never just rest. It was a journey, a mystery, a reminder that the unseen world was always near. All cities must, eventually, surrender to rest. Even Rome, mighty, bustling, eternal Rome, could not remain awake forever. By the deep hours of night, after the bakers had finished their work, after the taverns had gone quiet, after children had drifted into dreams, and even the watchmen had settled into steady patrols, the city itself seemed to exhale and grow still. The empire's heart slowed its beat. The noise of life gave way to the hush of sleep. To walk the streets at this hour was to step into a different Rome, one that few ever truly saw. The paving stones, worn by thousands of footsteps each day, now lay empty and gleamed faintly in the starlight. The great arches and temples stood in shadow, their marble columns pale against the sky, as if the city's monuments themselves had grown drowsy. Only the soft crackle of a torch or the faint whisper of wind disturbed the silence. The insulae, those tall, crowded apartment blocks, were dark, except for the rare glow of a single lamp. Inside, families slept close together, their breathing creating a rhythm that blended into the night. The heat of the day had long faded, and cool air drifted through cracks and shutters. Children curled against parents. Old men shifted softly on straw beds. Infants whimpered, then quieted as mothers soothed them in half-sleep. The voices of evening had faded into whispers, and then into silence. In the domus of the wealthy, the courtyards and gardens glowed faintly in lamplight before being extinguished one by one. Fountains still murmured in peristyles, their waters catching the moonlight. Masters reclined on couches now abandoned, their chambers prepared for rest by attentive servants. The mosaic floors that had sparkled during the day lay cool and still, reflecting only the pale glow of the moon. In cubicula, the small bedrooms, patrician families slept beneath painted ceilings, their dreams perhaps no different from those of the humblest artisan across the city. The watchmen, the vigils, moved slowly, their torches marking the rare figures still awake. Their voices were low, sometimes humming to pass the hours, sometimes calling softly to one another across intersections. They checked for sparks of fire, for shadows of thieves, for doors left ajar. Yet even their movements were unhurried, subdued by the heaviness of the hour. Rome seemed to lie under a spell, its vastness wrapped in a blanket of silence. The animals of the city, too, found their rest. Dogs curled in courtyards or at thresholds, their barks now replaced by steady breathing. Donkeys stood quietly in stables, shifting their weight, tails swishing lazily. Cats prowled the alleys less actively now, finding warm spots to curl against walls. Even the birds that nested in temple roofs or insulae rafters had stilled their wings, their calls silenced until dawn. The city was not lifeless. It simply slept. From the Tiber came a softer voice than usual. The river, steady and eternal, flowed as it always had. But at night, its murmur seemed louder, clearer, less drowned out by the clamor of the day. Its waters lapped against bridges and embankments, carrying moonlight upon their surface. For those awake enough to listen, it was the song of Rome itself, calm, patient, endless. Above, the sky kept its vigil. Stars shone with unwavering clarity, mirrored faintly by the scattered lamps below. The moon drifted across the heavens, its glow painting the rooftops in silver. Constellations traced their ancient stories over the city. Orion with his belt, the Great Bear, the shining Pleiades. To gaze upward from Rome at this hour was to feel the empire shrink, humbled beneath the immensity of the cosmos. The world of marble and empire was vast, but the night sky was vaster still. Inside the temples, priests tended the sacred fires that never slept. The eternal flame of Vesta glowed in its circular temple, a symbol of Rome's life and endurance. Tiny lamps flickered before statues of gods, their flames steady even as the city rested. These lights were promises that even in slumber, Rome remained under divine watch. Citizens could sleep, knowing that the gods had not abandoned them. Sleep itself was seen as a blessing, a gift of the gods. It was a surrender, a release of control, a trust that one would wake again with the dawn. In the quiet hours, Romans gave themselves to this trust. Their bodies stilled, their minds wandered into dreams, and the weight of the day slipped away. Some dreamed of ancestors, others of gods, others of simple joys, fields, meals, embraces. Whatever their visions, sleep carried them gently through the darkness. Imagine walking through the Forum at this hour. The paving stones, once alive with shouts and debates, now echo only with your steps. The rostra, where speeches had rung out, sit silent. The temples loom, their outlines softened by night. A stray dog crosses the square, pauses, and disappears into shadow. You hear only the trickle of a fountain and the faint rustle of leaves. The Forum sleeps as surely as the people within their homes. Or imagine pausing by a fountain in a narrow street. The water falls steadily, the sound almost like whispering. A lamp glows faintly in a nearby window, where perhaps one soul still lies awake. But all around, doors are shut, shutters closed, voices hushed. You lean against the stone, feel its coolness, and realize you are surrounded not by silence, but by rest. The city itself is breathing slowly, deeply, asleep beneath the stars. For Rome, these hours of slumber were essential. The city that bustled by day, that demanded so much energy and labor, could not exist without them. The bakers who worked at night, the guards who patrolled, the river that flowed, all were threads in the fabric of a city that paused but never ceased. Yet for most of its people, the night was rest, the comfort of home, the peace of dreams. And when the first light of dawn touched the horizon, Rome stirred once again. Roosters crowed, lamps were rekindled, bakers carried bread to stalls, families rose from beds, stretching and yawning. The city's heartbeat quickened, ready to face another day of life, labor, and history. But for a few hours each night, Rome had lain still, sleeping under its eternal sky. The greatness of the city was not only in its monuments, its armies, or its laws, but in this simple truth, that beneath all the power and clamor, Romans were human. They ate, they worked, they prayed, they dreamed, and like us, they slept. So let the image linger. A city vast and eternal, its lamps extinguished, its voices hushed, its people gathered in rest. The stars above, the river below, the breath of thousands rising and falling together. Rome, mighty Rome, asleep beneath the heavens, peaceful, timeless, and still. Though most of Rome lay asleep beneath the stars, beyond the city's walls another life stirred, the life of the roads. The empire was tied together by stone-paved highways, stretching mile after mile through hills, valleys, and plains. At night, these roads did not fall silent. They carried merchants and messengers, soldiers and wanderers, all moving under the moonlight. The hum of Rome extended far beyond its walls, reaching inns, farms, and villages that dotted the countryside. The roads themselves were marvels of Roman engineering. Straight and sturdy, lined with milestones and edged with drainage ditches, they cut across the land with purpose. Even in darkness, they offered direction, their pale stones glinting faintly in the moonlight. Travelers often walked by starlight, the sky their guide, or by the glow of torches carried in hand. The sound of sandals striking stone echoed in the still air, rhythmic and steady. Some who traveled at night did so out of necessity. Merchants carried carts of goods, eager to reach the markets of Rome by dawn. Soldiers marched in small groups, their armor clinking softly, their voices hushed. Couriers hurried with messages, their strides quick, their sandals worn smooth from long distances. For them, the night was not a time of rest, but of progress. The hours before sunrise, an opportunity to move unseen and uninterrupted. Inns along the roads, known as mansionese or capone, offered refuge to these travelers. Their doorways glowed with torchlight, beacons against the dark. Step inside, and you would find a space simple but welcoming. Wooden tables bore bowls of stew, jugs of wine, and loaves of bread. The air smelled of smoke, garlic, and oil. Travelers sat together, strangers bound by the shared rhythm of the road. Some spoke in whispers of their journeys. Others dozed where they sat, heads resting on their arms. The fire in the hearth crackled, its warmth drawing everyone closer. The rooms of these inns were humble, straw beds spread across wooden frames, blankets thin but serviceable. Families huddled together, while lone travelers curled against walls. The noise of footsteps and whispers lingered until fatigue overtook all. By midnight, the inn was a chorus of breathing, snores, and the occasional cough, its sounds blending into a lullaby of exhaustion. Beyond the walls, the countryside stretched silent, broken only by the call of an owl or the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Not all inns were safe. Some had reputations for theft or dishonesty, where travelers risked their purses as much as they found rest. Yet even these carried a kind of life. Dice rattled on tables, laughter rose from drunken voices, songs echoed into the night. The line between safety and risk was thin, but the roads demanded courage. To travel them was to place trust in chance, in strangers, in the gods who watched from the heavens. The countryside itself sang its own nocturnal song. Fields stretched under the moonlight, their crops rustling softly in the wind. Farmhouses glowed with faint lamplight, their families asleep within. Herds of sheep or cattle shifted in pens, their movements quiet but steady. Dogs barked occasionally, warning off foxes or thieves. The smells of hay, soil, and wood smoke carried on the breeze, earthy and grounding, a reminder of the simpler rhythms that lay beyond the city. The tombs that lined the road stood as silent witnesses. Roman custom placed the graves of the dead outside the city walls, and so the highways were flanked by monuments of stone. At night, they loomed as dark silhouettes against the sky, their inscriptions unreadable in the shadows. Travelers often quickened their steps when passing these tombs, whispering prayers for safety. Superstitions held that restless spirits lingered near their resting places, and to pass too slowly was to invite their attention. Yet even in their stillness, the tombs reminded all who traveled that life and death were woven together along the journey. Messengers of the state often traveled by night, their urgency too great to wait for daylight. Mounted on swift horses, they galloped across the stones, their hooves striking sparks in the dark. Cloaked against the chill, they carried sealed scrolls, messages from governors or emperors, orders that might change the fate of armies or provinces. Their speed was legendary, the cursus publicus, Rome's system of relay stations, ensuring that no message slowed, no night too deep for the empire's will to move forward. Bandits, too, made the night their own. In the more remote stretches, where trees crowded close to the road, dangers lurked. Shadows hid figures waiting for unsuspecting travelers, their whispers carried on the wind. The presence of soldiers and watchmen kept many routes safe, but fear of bandits was never absent. To counter it, some traveled in groups, torches held high, their voices steady to ward off danger. Others placed trust in amulets, charms tied around their necks or hidden in their clothes, prayers for protection on uncertain paths. The sky above the roads was vast, clearer than within the smoky streets of the city. Stars shone brightly, constellations tracing their eternal patterns. The Milky Way stretched like a river of light across the heavens, a guide for those who walked without lamps. The moon illuminated fields and hills, silvering the land in its glow. For travelers, the heavens were both map and comfort, promising that even in darkness, the gods watched from above. Imagine yourself now walking along such a road. The stones beneath your feet are cool, worn smooth by centuries of travelers before you. The night air is crisp, carrying the scent of grass and soil. To one side, fields stretch silent, broken only by the shapes of trees. To the other, tombs rise in shadow, their presence solemn but steady. Ahead, a faint torch flickers, an inn where warmth and food await. Behind you, the city lies sleeping, its hum faint but enduring. Above you, the stars blaze in silence, eternal companions on the journey. You pass through the inn's doorway. The fire glows warmly, voices murmur, bowls of stew steam gently. You take a place among strangers, share bread and wine, and feel the weight of the road ease from your shoulders. Soon, you will sleep on a straw bed. The sounds of the countryside around you, the road waiting again at dawn. But for now, there is rest, the shared peace of travelers who know the rhythm of night. The roads beyond Rome were arteries of empire, carrying armies, goods, and ideas across continents. Yet they were also human spaces, filled with laughter, fatigue, superstition, and song. At night, they revealed themselves most clearly, quiet, mysterious, alive with the hum of travelers and the stillness of the land. And so, even when Rome itself slept, the roads continued. They stretched outward into darkness, endless and patient, bearing footsteps and hoofbeats, laughter and whispers, prayers and dreams. Beneath the stars, the empire was bound together not only by power, but by the quiet persistence of its travelers, moving steadily through the night. When twilight deepened into true night, and families closed their doors against the darkness, another group of men stepped forward to keep the city safe, the vigils, Rome's night watch. Their presence was essential in a city so vast, crowded, and flammable. Rome was a place of grandeur, yes, but it was also a place of risk. Wooden insulae pressed tightly together, narrow alleys, taverns where wine loosened tempers, thieves who moved like shadows. To guard against these dangers, the vigils patrolled, their torches cutting through the gloom. The vigils were not glamorous figures. They were often freedmen, once enslaved, but now entrusted with the safety of Rome. Their numbers were large, thousands spread across the city, divided into cohorts, each responsible for a different district. Their duties were many: preventing fires, quelling disturbances, deterring thieves, and maintaining order when most of the city slept. The greatest fear of the Roman night was fire. With so many homes built of wood, with lamps burning in every chamber, with cooking fires smoldering, a single spark could become a catastrophe. Entire neighborhoods might vanish in flames before dawn. The vigils carried buckets, hooks, and pumps, ready to respond to the first cry of alarm. Their ears were always open for the crackle of flame, their eyes searching for the glow of smoke against the stars. Patrolling the streets, the vigils moved in groups, their sandals striking the stones in steady rhythm. Each man carried a staff or sword, and some bore horns to sound alarms. Torches in their hands lit their faces and threw long shadows behind them. Their voices were low, but now and then they called out, a challenge to someone loitering, or a greeting to fellow watchmen. The city was quieter under their gaze, its dangers checked by their presence. To imagine Rome without them is to imagine chaos. Thieves would have roamed more boldly. Fires might have spread unchecked. Quarrels from taverns could have spilled freely into the streets. Instead, the vigils gave the night its fragile order. They were not always loved. Some citizens complained of their authority, others mocked their status, but even the critics felt safer knowing they were there. The sound of their passing was familiar to every Roman, the crackle of their torches, the jingle of buckles and belts, the muffled thud of wooden staves on stone. These noises, faint but steady, reassured those lying in bed. They meant the streets were not empty, that watchful eyes moved through the darkness. In the silence of midnight, those sounds were a lullaby of safety. Sometimes, however, the calm was broken. A cry of fire might ring out, sharp and desperate. In an instant, the vigils sprang into action. Buckets were filled from fountains. Lines of men passed water hand to hand. Hooks tore at burning beams to keep flames from spreading. Horns blared, calling for reinforcements. The glow of fire lit the night sky, a terrible orange against the stars. Families rushed from their homes, clutching what few belongings they could. Children cried, dogs barked wildly, voices shouted instructions and prayers. The vigils, practiced in this chaos, worked with calm precision, their movements honed by constant drills. Many lives and homes were saved by their labor. At other times, the threat was crime. A thief caught slipping through an alley, a drunkard starting a brawl outside a tavern, a quarrel between neighbors that grew too loud. The vigils intervened, their presence enough to scatter troublemakers. They detained offenders, sometimes marching them off to magistrates, sometimes simply restoring order and moving on. Their authority was practical, not ceremonial. They were the guardians of Rome's sleep. The vigils also carried out smaller, quieter tasks. They checked lamps left burning in shrines, trimmed wicks so flames would not spread. They guided lost travelers through unfamiliar streets. They inspected the storage of grain and oil, commodities that, if ignited, could devastate entire districts. They even tended to the injured, carrying those who fell ill in the streets to safety. Their service was not only about punishment, but also about care. Imagine walking through Rome at night, a citizen heading home after a long day. The streets are dark, the alleys uncertain. Ahead, you see the glow of torches and hear the steady tread of the vigils. Relief washes over you. They nod as you pass, their eyes alert, their voices calm. Their presence makes the shadows feel less threatening. the silence less empty. You continue home with lighter steps, comforted by the knowledge that the city is watched. For those awake in their beds, the vigils were unseen but felt. When a distant horn sounded, they knew the watch was near. When the glow of torches passed beneath their windows, they trusted that order was maintained. Their work allowed others to surrender to rest, confident that dangers would be met, that alarms would not go unanswered. Superstitions mingled with this sense of safety. Some Romans believed the vigils were not only protectors of the living, but guardians against spirits. The night was thought to harbor wandering shades, restless souls of the dead. The torches and voices of the watchmen, moving steadily through the dark, were said to drive these spirits away. Whether true or not, the idea added another layer of comfort, human and divine protection woven together. Of course, the vigils were men, and not perfect. Some were weary, some inattentive, some perhaps tempted by the very crimes they were meant to prevent. Yet, as an institution, they stood as Rome's shield in the vulnerable hours. Without them, the city might have burned more often, quarreled more freely, descended into nightly chaos. With them, even imperfect, Rome endured. By the small hours before dawn, their patrols grew quieter. The taverns had emptied, the carts had paused, the dogs had curled into silence. The city lay in its deepest sleep, and the watchmen kept their posts, eyes sharp even as the world seemed still. They leaned against columns, whispered to one another, shared a piece of bread or a flask of water. Yet they never left their duties, for the night was theirs to hold. When dawn broke, their work ended. The first rays of sunlight touched the rooftops, the roosters crowed, and the city stirred. Families rose, bakers carried bread into the streets, merchants opened their stalls. The vigils returned to their stations, their torches extinguished, their tasks complete. Few citizens thanked them, for their work was quiet, often unnoticed. But Rome awoke safely, and that safety was their legacy. Imagine the city without them. Fires unchecked, thieves emboldened, nights filled with chaos. Instead, because of the vigils, Rome could rest. The empire's heart beat strongly, not only through its emperors, senators, and armies, but also through these watchmen, anonymous in history, yet essential in their time. So when the city slept, it was not abandoned. Torches glowed in the streets. Voices whispered in the alleys. Eyes watched from the shadows. The night was never entirely empty, never entirely unsafe. The vigils walked there, patient and steady, guardians of Rome's sleep. Most nights in Rome were ordinary, filled with the rhythms of work, meals, prayers, and rest. But every so often, the familiar pattern broke apart, and the city's evenings came alive with fire, music, and joy. Festivals carried Rome beyond its daily cares, binding families and neighbors together in celebration. By lamplight and torchlight, the streets transformed into places of wonder, laughter, and devotion. The Romang night, usually quiet, became radiant with life. Festivals were woven into the Roman calendar, marking the cycles of gods, seasons, and civic pride. Some were solemn, others wild, but all carried into the night hours, filling the city with unusual brightness. Lamps burned longer. Torches lined the streets. Fires blazed in public squares. Even the stars above seemed mirrored by the countless flames below. One of the most famous was Saturnalia, held each December in honor of Saturn, the god of time and plenty. During this festival, the order of society was joyfully reversed. Masters served slaves, gambling and games were permitted, and laughter replaced the usual discipline of Roman life. At night, the streets echoed with songs and shouts. Families exchanged gifts, tables overflowed with food, and neighbors invited one another into their homes. The city seemed to sparkle with freedom. Its strict rules softened for a few days of delight. The lamplight was brighter, the music louder, the air filled with merriment. In contrast, some festivals carried a sacred solemnity. The The rites of Vesta, keeper of the eternal flame, were observed with quiet reverence. Her priestesses, the Vestal virgins, tended the sacred fire, ensuring it never went out. On festival nights, the glow of her temple seemed especially bright, a reminder that Rome's heart was protected by divine flame. Pilgrims gathered in silence, their prayers rising into the night air like invisible smoke. Even amid the bustle of the city, these evenings carried a hush, a reverence that stilled voices and drew eyes upward to the stars. The festival of Bona Dea, the good goddess, was another sacred night, observed only by women. In lamplit chambers, priestesses and matrons gathered to honor her with music, offerings, and prayers for fertility and health. The sounds of flutes and hymns drifted into the night, mysterious to those excluded, but powerful to those within. For women of Rome, it was a rare moment of freedom and community, sheltered by secrecy and sanctity. Other nights erupted in spectacle. During triumphal celebrations, when victorious generals returned from war, the city glowed with torches and bonfires. Crowds filled the streets, cheering, singing, and feasting. Musicians played loudly, dancers whirled in the firelight, and wine flowed without end. The night became a stage of glory, Rome itself rejoicing beneath the heavens. Sleep was impossible. The city belonged to noise and light, to laughter and song. Public feasts often spilled into the evening hours. Amphitheaters, circuses, and theaters sometimes hosted spectacles that carried past twilight, their stages lit with rows of torches. Crowds lingered, unwilling to return home. Vendors sold food and drink beneath the stars, their voices calling out in the dark. Lovers strolled together among the crowds. Children clutched sweet cakes in their hands. Elders smiled as they watched torches dance like fireflies across the squares. Private celebrations, too, transformed the night. Wealthy families sometimes hosted banquets that stretched into the early hours. Their villas glowed with lamps, music floated through gardens, and laughter spilled into courtyards. Guests reclined on couches long after the main meal, sipping wine, reciting poetry, or playing games. The air was heavy with the fragrance of roses and spices, the flicker of hundreds of flames, creating an atmosphere both dreamlike and joyous. Even humbler households found ways to mark festival nights. Families saved coins to purchase extra food, perhaps a bit of meat or a richer wine. They decorated their doors with garlands, lit extra lamps, and invited neighbors to share in simple feasts. Children stayed awake longer, eyes wide with excitement as they watched torches flare outside. These small celebrations carried as much joy as the grandest banquets, for they were shared with love and laughter. Music was central to Roman festivals. Flutes, drums, cymbals, and lyres filled the air. Some rhythms were wild and frantic, inviting dancing in the streets. Others were solemn, echoing through temples during sacred rites. In either form, music transformed the night. Its notes blended with the crackle of fire, the murmur of crowds, and the hum of voices, turning the city itself into an instrument of celebration. The smells of festivals lingered long into the evening. Roasted meats turned on spits, their juices hissing as flames licked at them. Honey cakes and pastries perfumed the air with sweetness. Spices like cinnamon and pepper, imported from far lands, filled kitchens and taverns. The mixture of aromas drifted into every corner of the city, carried by the cool night breeze, wrapping Rome in a feast for the senses. Light was everywhere. Torches lined the streets, their flames leaping high. Lamps glowed in windows and courtyards, multiplied beyond ordinary nights. Bonfires burned in squares, sparks rising into the sky to mingle with the stars. For a time, darkness seemed defeated. Rome itself shone like a constellation brought down to earth, its brilliance echoing the heavens above. And yet, amid all the noise and brightness, there were moments of tenderness. A father lifting his child to see a parade by torchlight. A mother giving her daughter a small gift of fruit or ribbon. friends embracing after too much wine, lovers whispering beneath garlands hung on doorways. These small human moments glowed as brightly as the torches, shaping memories that endured long after the festival had ended. Eventually, the night grew quieter. Torches burned low, musicians set aside their instruments, laughter softened into yawns. Families returned home, their bellies full, their hearts light. The city that had roared with joy slowly surrendered again to rest. The last sparks of bonfires faded, the stars reclaimed their dominance, and Rome once more breathed in the rhythm of sleep. But the memory of festival nights lingered. They reminded Romans that life was not only labor and duty, but also joy, abundance, and togetherness. The empire may have been vast and disciplined, but it also knew how to laugh, sing, and dance beneath the stars. Imagine yourself there, standing in a Roman street lit by torches. Music drifts through the air, voices rise in song, and the smell of roasted food surrounds you. The night feels alive, every corner of the city glowing with joy. Then, as the hours pass, the lights dim, the voices quiet, and Rome exhales, returning to stillness. You walk home slowly, the memory of celebration warm in your heart, the stars above steady and eternal. Festivals gave Rome its balance: solemn prayers, raucous laughter, sacred rites, and simple joys. They lit the night with meaning and beauty, turning ordinary hours into timeless memories. And when they ended, they left behind not emptiness, but the gentle comfort of knowing that joy would return again, that the cycle of celebration was as eternal as the stars themselves. And so our journey through the nights of ancient Rome comes to an end. We have walked through streets glowing with oil lamps, listened to the murmurs of fountains, watched bakers at their ovens, joined families in their evening meals, and gazed at the stars above the forum. We have wandered into bathhouses, listened to poets and philosophers, watched children drift into dreams, and followed the footsteps of the vigils as they kept watch over the city. From the quiet of twilight to the joy of festival nights, Rome has shown us not only its grandeur, but also its humanity, the simple rhythms of rest, the beauty of silence, and the warmth of community. Beneath its arches and temples, it was a city of people who, like us, ate, laughed, prayed, dreamed, and finally slept. As you drift now toward your own rest, let the memory of Rome at dusk carry you. The glow of lamps, the murmur of voices, the hush of a city that, even in its greatness, needed sleep. Imagine the stars still shining above, eternal and steady, guiding you gently into dreams. Before you close your eyes completely, I invite you to take part in this journey with us. If you've enjoyed tonight's story, please subscribe to History for Sleep so you can join us again on future travels into the past. And in the comments, tell us what parts of history you'd like to hear about, what places or times you'd like to drift into, and when and where you listen to these stories. We love hearing from you, and your thoughts help guide where our journeys go next. Thank you for spending this night in Rome with us. May your sleep be deep, your dreams gentle, and your heart at peace. Until next time, rest well under history's stars.